recording. Right. Hello and welcome to this lesson 3 of our series of 10 on abstract art and landscapes. So we began the first week by doing some drawings and things. We were using pencil with high contrast and that, and then we've kind of taken that a little bit further by using ink and a bit of pen to look at negative and positive shapes to start breaking down the image. Because if you remember, we've looked at artists and how they reduce down their imagery and then it becomes kind of a very simplistic abstract image, very much like some of the artists we've looked at, such as Mondrian and loads of others. So we're going to have a quick look at some ideas I've got for this evening. It involves doing a little bit of collage as well, and painting some papers ready to do that with as well, and using scissors and glue. And it's really, this evening is a chance for you just to experiment with a few ideas and have a little bit of fun with colour and with shape, just to take it to the next level really. So we'll have a look at just a reminder of what we were doing last week, and I'll show you my sketchbook as well, and then I'll talk about how I've made some coloured papers and how to start creating an idea for, or ideas, so you might get more than one piece done tonight, but we'll see how it goes. All right, let's go over to the art wall. So you'll remember that I showed you a few of these images at the end of my little chat last week. So the idea being is that, you know, we can take these quite detailed and textured images and start to reduce them down to very simple forms. So we've got this picture on the right here of some walls, I think, in a forest, which just shows the tree trunks and then a big negative white space for the snowy ground and then the wolves in the background, or just walking through the trees there. And then we've got this really simplistic image of the ripples on water in the middle. So we've got some very distinctive shapes within these images. So the next thing I talked about was how you can take that one step further and create a composition which draws you through the image as well. So if I put, let me just find it, it was the negative and positive image of the branches. So if you remember, we looked at the branches of this image last week, and one or two of you actually finished this in the lesson and posted it on the website or on Facebook, and it's a really simple idea which involves dividing the space into these geometric forms. It doesn't have to be geometric, it could just be two lines, and then swapping between the dark and the light. So basically, if it's dark on one area, or square in this case, it swaps over. So we are creating much more of an abstract design using these ideas here. So, and that's what I did with my picture of the sort of green grove, the mossy grove that I did last week. So I'll shut some of those off and I'll show you what I've found for us to try out this week. So if you remember, I talked about these last lesson. I'll just zoom in so you can see a little bit more clearly. So these images are extremely abstract and broken down, but they do have a sense of landscape and perspective through the very simple triangular shapes and the wavy lines in here. Okay, so that was one idea, and I actually had a little go at doing one of those, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And then these two are the kinds of things that I thought maybe would be interesting for us to try with a little bit of colour and collage. Now I think these are actually painted, but they look very much like a collage type of image. So let me see if I can, there, this one. So this one here is quite useful, especially the one down the bottom here with the wiggly line through the middle, which recedes or gets smaller and gives us a sense of space and perspective in here. So does the one over here actually with the yellow path. It cuts over a hill and then goes around a bend. But they're very, very clear and simple shapes which actually create a sense of landscape, and I think create a sense of joy as well because of the really bright and fun colours you've got on here. And actually, as we look closer at these images, we can see there's a river perhaps in this middle one with the yellow sky, and then maybe a path going around a cliff on the third to the right, and this looks like a shoreline over here as well. So some really lovely beautiful collage style ideas. I'm not actually sure if they were painted or not, but they do look very much like collage images, so I thought these would be a nice little bit of inspiration for us this evening. So I'll show you now what I was thinking we would do and how we would tackle it using some of the photographs that I supplied on the drive before. So we'll go over to my desk here. So if you remember, we were drawing landscapes, or in this case like a woodland scene. You might have had a landscape yourself, and this is with a lot of the texture and the detail and the shadows and the tones and so forth, but done with really quite contrasting shading and things like that. Okay, so the next thing we then did is, this what I actually photographed and printed out the design that I did previously. So if you remember the negative and positive drawing that I showed you a minute ago with the branches, is exactly what I've done here, is put a couple of lines down the middle and then have this as my focus area with more detail, and then either side I've kind of flipped over the whites and the darks on either side there to create like almost like a frame or a division which becomes a little bit abstract. And then you'll remember me, because I got to the end of that and I thought let's develop it a bit further, I added a bit of colour. So if you remember those designs I just showed you a minute ago, the first ones I showed you, I simplified and created a kind of design of this using very simple shapes here. Now that's not what we're going to be doing exactly, but the idea is that I've taken some of the basic shapes and really loosely created a composition in abstract. So we've got obviously the steps going up through here, and then we've got the rocks either side, and these sweeping marks over here are to kind of represent the sky but also the foliage in the background. So it's very, very, once again, very experimental. Now we're going to do, as I said, we're going to do a little bit of collage tonight, so I'll just put that one to the side and show you how I created some papers for this tonight. So this is just normal cartridge paper. It doesn't matter too much what you use. If it's really thin, you might want to use some ink or watercolour. I've just used some acrylic paint here. Now the thing that happens with this is, because you've got a certain colour palette here, and I've got quite a few colours but I'm going to be a bit more selective than that, is that you're limiting your colours. Therefore you've got to make more decisions about how you use those colours, rather than saying, oh, you know, I just want a bit more green or I want a bit more red or whatever it is you're using. You're limiting yourself a little bit, and it actually makes you sort of think about how you're going to create what you're going to do. So I've got browns, I've got greens, I've got a little bit of red because it's opposite green, it'll make it show up better. So these colours were directly from tubes of paint, so I've not mixed anything as such here. I've just literally said I'll have a bit of that colour, a bit of that colour, and maybe a bit of another colour. So I've ended up with these. Now I'm not going to use all of these in one design. I'm going to flip around a little bit and just use, as I said, limited ones. So to do that, to create your colours, what you'll need is some paper, obviously. So this is half of A4, A5 paper, and I've got quite a large, well, let's see what it says. It says on here it's a short flat / bright Winsor & Newton brush. Okay, so I've got a little bit of green on here, and with it, if you're using acrylic, just put a little bit of water on your brush so that it loosens the paint up, because if you use it neat, the paint acrylic, it will dry out so quickly that it will dry out while you're brushing, especially if you're in a warm room. So it being a bit wetter allows you to spread the paint over evenly with a flat brush, and it will dry really quickly as well, acrylic. If you use ink, it will and you spread it out thinly enough, it will dry quick enough as well. So, and you know, you could almost just start using this straight away, to be honest with you, as long as you don't absolutely soak the paper and you just like add a little bit of water to your paint, you'll be fine. So there we go. So I've got a dyed coloured piece of paper there. So the next thing to do is I'm going to do this sort of as a sort of demonstration one first of all tonight. So if I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we've got a photograph of, now I've chosen this one because it's got these beautiful windy paths. So the reason why I've chosen pathways is because it automatically divides the landscapes, gives something very specific for you to sort of work with. Then I've got some carbon paper. If you don't have that, then the thing to do is, and I think I explained this last week, is to put some graphite on the back, and then you can draw over the landscape or whatever it is to transfer it onto paper. So with this, I have put it on, and this is just for a guide. First of all, there's some paper underneath, and I've used my pen and just gone around the lines to transfer it onto a piece of paper like that. Okay, now as I said, it is experimental, so it's not necessarily about getting it perfect or anything like that. It's more about let's see what happens, and let's explore and see how it all goes, basically. So once you've got your kind of map of where things are going to go, then you can start to decide what colours you'd like to use. So I would like, I think, to try something. I'll go for something a bit more organic. So I'm going to have about 3 colours to start with. I'll probably get more in, to be honest with you. So I've got maybe these 3, and let me just have a look, see what I fancy. So I could go for those. I might go for something, actually I'm going to have a yellow with that as well. I'm going to try this. So I've got these 3 colours here. So to start with, all you need to do is put your paper down like that, your carbon paper, lay your picture over the top and decide which area you would like to start to collage in first of all. So I think I'm going to go for this area here, this green area in the middle. So we're not even necessarily trying to make the landscape look like it, you know, like these are greens obviously in here, but we're doing something a bit different with it. So we can be a bit freer with how we put things together. So there's my shape. So I've just used the carbon paper, the dark side down, to transfer that. And then you can get your scissors. Now I've got a really big pair of scissors here. I would normally use a scalpel blade and a board. So I'm using scissors because I realise most people won't necessarily have a scalpel blade. So I'm just going to chop that bit out of there, and I'm going to go around the outside. Sometimes it's a bit annoying if you've got one of these carbon paper black lines on here. zoom in a little bit again. Boink, there you go. So I kind of cut on the inside of the shape like this. Oop. Just cut that off. Go all the way around, and when you're using the scissors, you can turn the paper rather than the scissors. That often helps. See what I'm doing there? And then keep cutting as you do it. There we go. All right, oops. Right, so then I can put that in like that. Okay, now one thing a lot of collage artists will do is they will stick everything down at the end as opposed to sticking it all down as you go. Okay, and that way you can adjust and move things about. The only problem with that is that you've got to remember what you had when you start lifting it up to stick it down again. All right, so experiment and see what you come up with. So I mean, you can just paint the surface here with your glue. Now the glue I've got is just a simple PVA glue. This glue comes from B&Q. I get it in big tubs because I do a lot of collage, and then you can place it on the surface. Now even if you've covered the whole of this picture with your design or with your colours, you can still work back over the top, and you'll see me doing a little bit of that, layering the colours as we go. All right, so there's no sort of this is exactly what I'm going to produce at the end here. It's more about let's see what happens with these and create some abstract designs. Now as I said, I'm working quite small here, so if you just think, well, let's just give it a go, then work on a smaller scale, but later you might want to, and this was my thought here, was we could try some smaller ones, and then later we could work from the drawings that we've done and do a larger design or a larger landscape using these ideas. Okay, so I hope that sounds all right. That's what we're aiming for just there. I'll just copy that and put it onto the screen here. There we go. So it's this kind of thing, and if you want to have a closer look at these yourself, you'll see them on the drive, and there's a link to the drive where we've got all the images on your email that you would have received from me. Okay, all right, so let's have some fun and see what we can come up with. Colour. I do have a lot of fun with this because all the colour that we're using in this particular lesson, and of course it's one of my favourite things to do, is collage work. So some of the elements that I add later on, adding much more detail perhaps than the examples that you can see on the screen, but I do find myself with a little bit of extra time towards the end once I've collaged all of the shapes in, very much like the ones on the screen, and so I start to add in more ideas and details. So a few little tips for you are, when you're cutting out these curvy shapes and things like that, just cut them a little bit wider so that they kind of overlap some of the lines that are already in the drawing or the map, as I mentioned earlier, and then you'll start to see how things start to take shape. So as far as choosing the colours as I go along, I don't have any particular plan, but I do kind of formulate one as I go along. So I think, right, I'm going to do some blues and just some greens, and then gradually, as it starts to layer up and things, I start to add much more detail. And it's wonderful to see how all of these colours actually come together to make the final image. So as you can see here, I've got about four colours all together. I've got 2 greens, a blue and a yellow in here. So you don't want to use too many colours, as I mentioned before. To be fair, there are quite a few colours in the landscapes that we can see on the screen, but to start with, at least use a limited colour palette. That way you're forcing yourself to make more careful decisions about what colours to use, where to use them, and how often or what size to use those colours as well. Now you can see I'm using a really big pair of scissors to cut out my shapes too. So these are they're textile scissors, and I just like the gold, but they're quite nice because you end up with you get this kind of interaction between the hand and the materials, and you get these really nice you get this nice edge to the imperfections and things to your shapes. So, but saying that, you know, you can use, which is what I would normally do, to be honest, with some collages anyway, is I would use my scalpel blade. And I do use a scalpel blade on this one a little bit later on because I want to do some really fine and small details. The paper's also quite nice to use as well. For this, it's just cartridge paper, just a normal standard weight cartridge that, as you saw earlier, I've painted. And when you've got a slight, you know, like a normal sort of paper thickness, you end up with a little bit more texture when you get the layering of the papers on top of each other. You do get that anyway. Well, I mean, I often use printed paper from the photocopier as well to do a lot of my collages, because I like to print words on my collage materials as well as the colours and things. So you do get texture, especially the way I work when I'm layering up constantly lots of different materials on top of each other. So you can see here now I'm starting to layer up the image, and I'm almost here at the stage you can see just above on the screen here. I could put a few more shapes on and it'll probably be about there. So this kind of composition here is what we're after. But there is a little bit more layering in here than you can see on the screen. But because of the nature of the way I work personally, and this might be the same for you, is I start looking at some of the details in my image as well, which is lots of vegetables and lettuces and things. It's a very unusual kind of garden in that nothing's in rows, it's more planted ornamentally, I suppose, with all these lettuces and things like that. So that's what you can see me adding in. Now you might think, well, I kind of preferred it as it was, and that's absolutely fine, but this is an experiment, so why not just push it a little bit further and have a little bit of fun with what you're doing here. There we go. So on this particular bit, I usually just stick things down because it takes away that kind of indecision about where things should go. So I try to be a bit assertive with the way that I glue things down. Often, some artists will lay things out and carefully move them around, which is probably a better way to work because you're being much more careful about your composition. I prefer to allow for natural mistakes to occur because I kind of like the idea of the fact that some things are not going to look like they're exactly in the right place, or they're not going to look perfect. So it's a bit of fun to sort of just push yourself in that way. and just be a bit more experimental and leave things to chance and have that natural feel of the person interacting with the materials in an analog way, as they call it, on the screen. So now I've got a couple of trees up there in the background. I've cut some really tiny little bits. I do at this point now realise that I'm going to run out of time, even though I've done what we set out to do. There were lots of other little ideas that I could put in that I started to think of. And then I thought, well, this is where I normally work and I get stuck into the detail and things, because I do have quite an eye for detail when it comes to collage. But doing things sometimes as well in a limited time span actually forces you to make decisions quicker in order to get to the end result, or do as much as you can in the time you've got. A little bit like on those programs that you see on Sky, portrait programs, where they only have 4 hours to paint in or something. You can see I've got my brush in my mouth. I always do that as well. So one of the great things about doing collage is you can just keep going, just keep laying things on top. And that's one of the things I realised as well, doing my own work. Here we go. It's using the scalpel blade to cut off very small bits. But one of the things I realised, if you don't get things right, you just collage over it. Fair enough, you can keep going and going and going, and sometimes you have too many layers and it piles up, but that can also be a nice effect too. Anyway, I've kind of got to the end part of this evening's lesson. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and if you're still watching, thank you, and have a go yourself at doing this if you're visiting today. It's so absorbing. Making art, doing collages, all that sort of stuff is a lot of fun, especially once you get into it. Sometimes I find the bit where you're kind of thinking, I need to do some art, I want to do some art, I want to do this, I want to do that. The anticipation of going ahead and doing it is often harder than the sitting down and actually doing it. Anyway, I'm going on a bit now, so I'm going to go. Have a wonderful evening or week or whatever you're doing, and hopefully you'll tune in again next time. Bye now.